Good morning, and welcome to the joint EIM Governing Body and California ISO Board of Governors meeting. Please go to the layout icon located on the top right corner of your screen and select Hide Participants with Video Off from the list of options in the drop-down. To minimize the background noise on this call, please ensure that your audio device is muted. With that, I'll turn the call over to Roger Colanton. Please go ahead. Roger, can you please unmute your line?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is Roger Colanton. I am the Corporate Secretary for the California ISO, and welcome to the Joint Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body and ISO Board of Governors meeting this morning. Let me start out with a roll call for the Board of Governors. Chair Galitova?
Present.
Vice Chair Bagwad?
Present.
Governor Borenstein?
Present.
Governor Leslie?
Present.
Governor Shorey?
Here.
Thank you. And for the Western EIM Governing Body, Chair Decker?
Here.
Vice Chair Kanzioka?
Here.
Member Fong?
Here.
Member Gardner?
Here.
And welcome, Jennifer. We're happy to have you. And Member Preston?
Thank you.
Here.
Excellent. At this point, let me turn it to the Chair of the EIM Governing Body, Anita Decker, for a welcome message.
So I just want to be quick with this, but I really want to welcome everybody and all the participants on the phone today for making time to be on this call. Because clearly we would not be here but for the commitment of the GRC and all the work that they've done in the interest of strengthening the joint authority and strengthening the way that we make decisions. So this part two of the resolutions have been, or not resolution, but this part two of the work has been long in coming. So I'm really excited to get through this agenda today and see how it goes. But again, I really want to thank all the participants for making time to be here with us.
Thank you, Anita. And to you, Chair Galitova? You're on mute.
Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you, Anita. And on behalf of the CAISO board, I also wanted to welcome everyone to this important meeting of the EIM Governance Review Part 2 Final Proposal. And it's a pleasure to be here at the joint meeting with the EIM Governing Body on this important occasion. I want to acknowledge all the hard work of the GRC members, and especially Therese Hampton as the chair, who was actually volunteered for this position, but she managed to run a brilliant process of all GRC meetings with an iron will, an incredible source of patience, and a sharp focus on getting the job done. Along with Therese Hampton and all the GRC members, I want to acknowledge the hard work of the CAISO staff, especially Bert Gross, Ben Schonkweiler, Stacy Crowley, Peter Calusi, of course Stacy Karpinen and Kim Perez, and our CEO, Elliot Mainzer. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that we greatly appreciate the support of ISO management and the Board of Governors for the process in ensuring that the GRC had all the resources it needed to run a flawless process. This has been a long, almost 2-year journey that's been very inclusive, transparent, and collaborative and engaged. And I'm really looking forward to the discussions today. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Angelina. Thank you, Anita. Before we go to the next overview of the agenda and the process, the first item on the agenda today is actually the public comment section, which is for public comment unrelated to the agenda items on today's agenda. So if anyone has public comment in that regard, now would be the opportunity. Operator, can you check for that, please?
Sure. To make a public comment, if you're using the WebEx audio, you may enter the queue by using the WebEx raise hand icon located just above the chat panel. You'll hear a beep tone when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your name and affiliation and your comment. If you're just on the phone line and not on the WebEx, please dial #2 on your phone. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your name and question. I do not see any comments in the queue as of now.
Thank you, operator. So leading to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the decision on the EIM governance review, part 2 draft final proposal. First of all, let me note on that item, we do have a public comment letter that has been submitted for the record to both the EIM governing body as well as the Board of Governors. And that public comment letter is a joint letter, and I will just read these entities that joined in this letter: American Clean Power Association, American Clean Power California, California Municipal Utilities Association, Environmental Defense Fund, Environmental Entrepreneurs, Independent Energy Producers Association, Natural Resources Defense Council, and I think there's 2 students, excuse me. The UCLA law professor Michael Klein, chair and professor of law from UCLA School of Law, and then Dan and Ray Emmett, professor of environmental law at UCLA School of Law, Professor Wang from UCLA School of Law, and Jay Precourt, Provostial Chair, Professor and Senior Fellow, Precourt Institute for Energy, Stanford University, Jim Sweeney, Professor of Management Science and Engineering from Stanford University. So it's quite a list, eminent list, and all in support of today's proposal. And let me also briefly note the process that we are going to have today. So as soon as I'm done, I'll turn it to Stacy Crowley, our Vice President, External and Customer Affairs, for a brief introduction of this item. And then the presentation will be provided by Therese Hampton, the chair of the GRC. We'll have an opportunity for public comment on the agenda item. We'll have an opportunity for comments and questions from both the EIM governing body as well as the Board of Governors. At that point, we'll have an opportunity for the GRC members to comment on the proposal and have an opportunity for both the governing body and the board for deliberation. And once we get through that, we will have a move to a vote by the EIM governing body and then the Board of Governors. So with that, let me turn it to you, Stacy Crowley, for your introduction. Thank you. Do we have Stacy?
Stacy, can you please unmute yourself? Stacy, yes, please go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. This is Stacy Crowley, the Vice President of External and Customer Affairs here at the ISO. I am so pleased today to bring this item to both the governing bodies and the Board of Governors. I would simply like to introduce Therese Hampton, the chair of the EIM Governance Review Committee, who will present the Governance Review Committee's Part 2 draft final proposal for the EIM governance changes. And on behalf of the ISO, and as reflected in the chair's earlier welcome remarks, I just want to thank the Governance Review Committee for their hard work, led by Therese Hampton. They had thoughtful discussions over the past year and a half or more, and I think their work is a testament to the outreach and the hard deliberations that they had. So with that, I will turn it over to Therese for her presentation.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Chair Glitova, Chair Decker, the governors, and the governing body members. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to present the Part 2 draft final proposal to both boards. If you recall, when we did the Part 1 draft final proposal, I was on the side of the road during a road trip, a family road trip. Andy Campbell provided the presentation to all of you. So it's nice to actually be here, seated at a desk. With this presentation, I'll walk through all of the major elements of the proposal and try to give you some context for the GRC decision, and I look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation. Before I start, I would like to offer my sincere thanks to each of the GRC members who took their role very seriously and engaged well on each of these topics. You know, we were primarily virtual, which I think in some ways had its challenges and in some ways had its advantages. And we really just, you know, we probably moved through this process a little slower than we might have otherwise, but I think the quality of engagement and the quality of product really is very, very high. And we could not have done this without the support of a lot of CAISO staff and management, so we really appreciate that. Chair Galiteva did mention specifically Peter Calusi, who kind of helped us manage through this whole process, and Bert Gross and Dan Schonkweiler, who answered all of our questions and really just were exceptional in the support. So we really appreciate all of that. I'm going to go to the next slide and begin the overview. This is just a summary of the request that was made to us, which was to develop a consensus proposal that has the support of all members. We were to strive for consensus for the support of all members for the modifications to the EIM governance structure. I am happy to say that we had a unanimous vote on this Part 2 draft final proposal as we did in the Part 1 final proposal. If we can go to the next slide. This slide is just a reminder of this two-part process that we used, where we brought to you earlier in the spring the Part 1 draft final proposal. Thank you for your approval of that and implementation. And I think, you know, we all would have liked to have put forward a single proposal rather than in two parts, but I actually believe this two-part approach gave us some really important extra time with stakeholders to build out a more refined definition of joint authority and address some stakeholder concerns in the dispute resolution process. And I really think we have a more robust delegation of authority proposal in the way that we've done this. So it is a two-part, but I think it's worked very, very well for us. And if we go to the next slide, this slide just is a kind of a reminder, this Part 2, specifically around the delegation of authority, considered all of the previous drafts and comments on the delegation of authority from the beginning of the GRC process. So we reflected and considered the comments on the initial scoping paper, the straw proposal, and the revised straw proposal, and then we used this winter and spring to do specific outreach on the remaining delegation of authority issues to really focus in on the areas where there were remaining stakeholder concerns. And so if you go to slide 5, or the next slide, this is just a general summary of what the proposal accomplishes. And so at a high level, the proposal expands the scope of issues over which the EIM governing body holds formal approval authority, but it also expands the scope of issues that the ISO board presumptively engages on the merits versus through the consent agenda. We really worked hard to try and provide a strong incentive for both boards to resolve their differences before going to FERC, but also recognize there are circumstances when a filing is needed. And so we've tried to provide a path here for a filing to go forward without joint approval, but provide the EIM governing body the ability to provide an opinion on that filing. And last, we have enhance the durability of delegation while still providing the ISO board with the authority it needs to make changes if necessary. So if we go to the next slide, so this here is the specific proposed language for what rules would be subject to joint authority. This is kind of the foundation of this joint authority proposal, and really tried to be very clear early on in the comment process, and both in terms of what the GRC asked of stakeholders and some of the feedback we got. There was this desire to have a bright line, right, to not have this be vague. And we think this rule does help to provide a lot of clarity that the scope of joint authority would apply to any ISO tariff rule that is applicable to. So that's the important part. That's why it's bolded. That's applicable to an EIM balancing authority area, an EIM entity, or market participants within the EIM entity balancing authority area in their capacity as participants in the EIM. but then trying to be as equally clear about what's excluded from joint authority is any changes to a tariff rule that apply or is applicable only to the ISO balancing authority area or the ISO controlled grid. We supported this language because of the clarity that it provides and as I mentioned, the applicable to language. We did provide in both the draft that we sent out to stakeholders in the spring, but also in this final proposal, a review of the tariff and how this rule might apply to different elements of the existing tariff. But we also recognize that it's not possible to forecast how every initiative or stakeholder initiative would be handled because initiatives are complex and sometimes they involve many different tariff elements or tariff rules. The proposal that we provided to you, though, does outline how the rule would apply to two specific initiatives that stakeholders have had questions about. There were questions as we went through this process about load, exports, and wheeling priorities initiative. Would that be under joint authority or not? And system market power, would that be under joint authority or not? Based on this rule, because those two elements those two initiatives as they're currently defined apply only to the ISO balancing authority area or the ISO controlled grid, would not be under joint authority. So we did provide that clarity in the proposal. As they're configured and designed, they would not fall under joint authority. It is possible in the future, if those initiatives expanded to include rules that might affect EIM transfers in some way, then some level of joint authority might be warranted. But as currently known and decided and designed, they would not fall under joint authority. We did get some requests from stakeholders to do more itemization of what was in or out of joint authority or some different kind of exclusions, but we really think the clarity of this rule is what's important and that we think it can be used to guide future decisions for what's under joint authority. So the next slide talks about how the joint authority decision process would work. Basically we have each board must approve by majority vote the proposal that's put before them. Generally, decisions under joint authority would be decided at joint meetings held in Folsom or throughout the market footprint. And this was a really important feature to the GRC. The joint meetings were really important because we think it is an important step in creating the kind of collaboration between the two boards that we've already seen. We've seen a lot of collaboration in these joint meetings, but we also thought it was important to have you hear from stakeholders and at the same time, from the same set of stakeholders, have common information from ISO and other presenters. And in this slide, we talk about, we did talk a lot this spring with stakeholders about joint authority. We also are recommending that the EIM governing body continue to have advisory input to the board. And so the advisory input that we're suggesting here would be for any changes to rules of the real-time market that are not already under joint authority. So recognition that there will be a fair amount of the rules from the real-time market that will be under joint authority. Anything that's not under joint authority would be given advisory authority. And in addition, the board may request an advisory opinion from the governing body on any issues that it believes substantially affect the operation of the ISO market. So, dispute resolution. So as I mentioned in the overview, we did try to develop a dispute resolution process with an eye towards encouraging agreement and recognizing that we haven't seen, actually up until this point, any need for a dispute resolution process. But the fact that we haven't seen it doesn't mean we don't need to plan for it in the future. So we wanted to recognize there may be situations where joint approval does not occur, but action may still be needed. So the first element here is that the encouragement or the requirement to take 2 attempts at a mutually agreeable proposal. What that means is if you go through the stakeholder process, you did not find an agreement, then a revised proposal would be developed to address the areas of difference and stakeholder engagement would be conducted. Another way to think about it might be a remand, right? If the 2 boards say this isn't something that we can both agree on, then it gets remanded back to staff and to the stakeholder process. If those two efforts or other methods are not successful and the board unanimously votes that the tariff filing is critical to preserve reliability or protect market integrity, they may authorize a filing. So we've allowed then for a situation if there is a critical need to make the tariff filing, the ISO board may do that. In that instance, the ISO is required to include an opinion or a statement from the EIM governing body that can be developed with outside counsel. We've also provided for a circumstance where it might be time critical and there might not be enough time to provide the remand process or the second round. And we've also provided that by unanimous vote, the board may approve a filing on an expedited basis. Now, that was a lot of words. Just a little bit of context about what this is and how it's similar or different to what we had before. If you remember in earlier versions, we were talking and recommended 2 different filings at FERC, right? If you couldn't get to an agreement that there would be these joint filings at FERC. Really, that was met by many questions and concerns by all kinds of stakeholders, even those that maybe supported it in the beginning, those that didn't care for it and thought it really posed some real issues. And so we think this is a really nice and elegant way both to encourage joint approval, but really allow the ISO board to maintain the ability to file a tariff if they need to, and still have the EIM governing body have the ability to provide an opinion in that process. We've had a lot of questions about this, both the funding and the role of outside counsel. With that, outside counsel is intended to be funded by all market participants, but we have talked about that the purpose of that outside counsel isn't just drafting a filing. It's not a large, expansive scope. It is around drafting a filing, and we've said fairly regularly we are optimistic and hopeful that we don't get to this place. We are hoping that this is a not needed feature. So if we go to the next slide, as I mentioned previously, we supported the definition of what falls under joint authority because we believe this applicable to element of the definition should provide a pretty bright line for what is inside and outside of joint authority. However, there still needs to be a process for both boards to have input on determining what's under joint authority and what is not. And we propose to retain the process that is currently used for the EIM with one modification. And just a reminder, for the current process, it involves CAISO staff makes an initial recommendation and then seeks stakeholder input on that decisional classification. And the recommendation and stakeholder input is provided to chairs of both boards. If both boards can't agree, a committee of the whole is convened. So not the 2 5-member boards, but a committee of the whole, all 10, is convened. And if the committee is tied, then the ISO board chair serves as a tiebreaker. That's the current process that's used for the EIM. We're proposing to retain that same process. We did get a question about what if one of the board may not have all 5 of their members seated, and how might that affect the committee of the whole circumstance. And what we've recommended in this draft final proposal is that the weighted voting be provided to the board with fewer members so that they actually have a total of 5 votes, even if they don't have 5 members. So for instance, if a board only had 4 members seated, each of their votes would have a 1.25 weighting in the voting process, so they had a total of 5. So this is the only modification or addition, I would say. It's really just an addition that we are recommending to the current decisional classification process. And then the last area of the draft final proposal addresses the durability of this delegation of authority, and the elements outlined on this slide have not really modified significantly over time, but to just kind of quickly review, any changes of the EIM governing body's delegation of authority would require a unanimous vote of the board. And the board should consider any advisory input from the EIM governing body, the Regional Issues Forum, and the body of state regulators. And then if there was a difference, if for instance, the governing body advised against the change to the delegation of authority, then there would be a 45-day period for the board and the EIM governing body to work out any of those differences before the board votes, and the recommendation to have a public meeting in that 45-day process. And for any changes that are voted on by the board, by the ISO board, a notice period for implementing the change is required that is equal to the length of the notice period that the EIM entities may have for withdrawing from the EIM. That's currently 180 days. EIM entities can withdraw in 180 days, so the suggestion is you give them 180 days notice for withdrawal. And then this is the exception to the previous requirements to change the delegation of authority. We wanted to address a situation where there is, for some reason, a large number of EIM entities leaving the market footprint, and to provide the board the ability or the flexibility to modify the delegation of authority without the long notice periods. And so what we proposed here is that if 75% or more of the net energy load in the EIM outside of the ISO balancing authority area have given their notice of their intent to withdraw, then the ISO board may revert the delegation of authority back to the original delegation of authority without the notice periods. Again, with unanimous vote. Doesn't need to have unanimous vote, but you can avoid the 45 and the 180-day notice periods and revert back to the original delegation of authority. So that is the summation of what's in the proposal. We did receive support for the revised definition for the scope of joint authority and the modification to the dispute resolution process. And we received some limited refinements and clarifications, which we've addressed where we thought were appropriate. With the draft final proposal, we did include a comment matrix that summarizes our response to all the stakeholder comments that we received. And in our public meeting, we did receive two comments, public comments that we've noted here. I talked about the necessity for the use of outside counsel and the amount and allocation of the associated costs. And then we also received a comment supportive of the proposal and that it should be leveraged for West-wide energy challenges. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Therese. At this point, we have an opportunity for public comment. So if the operator could queue up and see if we have any public comment.
Sure. As a reminder, if you're using the WebEx audio, you may enter the question queue by using the WebEx raise hand icon located just above the chat panel. You'll hear a beep tone when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your name, affiliation, and comment. If you're just on the phone line and not using the WebEx audio, please dial #2 on your phone. You'll hear a notification when you're unmuted. At that time, please state your name, affiliation, and comment. I do see a few callers in the queue. Moving on to the first caller. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to provide a few comments at this last important step of the Western EIM governance review process. Commissioner Tani, president of the EIM body of state regulators, sends her regrets. She has a conflicting engagement this morning, so I'm pleased to offer these comments on her behalf. I'm Uri Lee, the wholesale market electricity market analyst at the Western Interstate Energy Board, and I support the BOSSR's work. The BOSSR appreciates the opportunity to submit consensus comments on the EIM governance review Part 2 draft final proposal. The BOSSR currently includes 10 of the 11 states in the Western Interconnect. One of the boss's responsibilities is to express a common position where possible in the CAISO stakeholder processes or to the EIM governing body on EIM issues. The bosser, as a group that operates on consensus, appreciates the collaboration necessary to bring a diverse group of stakeholders together and research consensus on as difficult an issue as joint authority. The bosser has supported a joint authority model since before the GRC was created. We are very pleased with the resulting proposal to extend joint authority to all proposals to change or establish any CAISO tariff rule applicable to the EIM entity balancing authority areas, EIM entities, or other market participants within the EIM entity balancing authority area in their capacity as participants in the EIM. Not only does this model better balance the interests of participants inside and outside California, but it also allows the board and governing body to work together on issues that affect all of the stakeholders. We believe these joint sessions will encourage dialogue and promote durability of the current CAISO market and any possible future expansion opportunities. We further find the proposed resolution of disagreements between the board and governing body to be a satisfactory path. The proposal strongly encourages the bodies to come to a mutually agreed upon resolution. It avoids a dual fork filing that was a concern of many of the commenters, but preserves a path that ensures FERC can weigh any conflicting positions. Thanks again for your time. The bosser looks forward to a unanimous vote of approval for the joint authority proposal. Thanks.
Thank you for your.
Moving on. I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just thanking the speaker for her comments and on behalf of Bosser. And we can have the next speaker, please.
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Good morning. This is Eric Eisenman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Eric, we can hear you.
So I'm speaking today as a governance review committee member. Thank you for the time. I want to thank all my colleagues on the GRC for the collaboration and the great work over the last 2 years. Therese Hampton was just a fabulous lead, and I especially want to thank Angelina and Val for their participation. I also want to thank the CAISO staff and stakeholders for their input. So I've been the only GRC member who works for a California utility, which is probably both a blessing and a curse. So when considering joint authority, I've been hypersensitive to the ramifications of joint authority to California consumers and California utilities. I think the GRC has threaded the needle with the proposal before you today. It has been especially important to identify what is excluded from joint authority, namely tariff rules applicable only to the CAISO balancing authority and grid. That includes the wheeling priorities and system market power mitigation rules. So I thank my colleagues for their engagement on those topics. I'd especially like to thank Jeff Nelson and the team at Southern California Edison, PG&E, 6 cities, and the CPUC for their engagement and thoughtful feedback and input is really important to me. I'll note that the GRC has developed a very good dispute resolution process that Therese described a few minutes ago. So what's next after this proposal? So discussions about EDAM have begun about extending the day-ahead market throughout the West. But let me say this, which is my personal view. The ultimate endpoint and outcome is a Western RTO with appropriate governance. going to take a lot of work, but I'm confident that we all collaborate to get there. And that could mean that the GRC will be back. So with all that said, I would ask the board and the governing body to approve this Part 2 proposal from the Governance Review Committee. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate your comments. Can we go to the next commenter, please?
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
I'm Ralph Cavanna from the Natural Resources Defense Council. Governors and members, in 1998, I was a member of a U.S. Department of Energy task force on North American grid reliability, chaired by former Congressman Phil Sharp. That report called out the fragmentation of the Western grid as a particular threat to reliable electricity service for everyone connected to it. You are taking an important step today toward reducing that threat, and not a moment too soon. I'm here this morning to reaffirm NRDC's support for these governance measures for reasons outlined in an August 18 letter to the CAISO and EIM boards that is in your record and that both Roger and Therese referred to. The letter is signed by representatives of California business, utility, and environmental groups, and also by 5 distinguished California professors, and I'm acutely aware that I am speaking to boards that are no strangers to distinguished California professors. The authors of our joint support letter know well that California cannot meet its goals of affordable and reliable decarbonization without enhanced Western grid integration. Californians celebrate the progress already made since 2014 by the energy imbalance market, but we know that much more is needed and that it won't be possible without governance that feels and is broadly representative, independent, and fair to all stakeholders across the vast and diverse region that shares as much to gain from providing these assurances as their neighbors. Please vote aye today, and thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Comments? I'm feeding back. So let's move to the next commenter, please.
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Thank you. I'm Josh Walter with Seattle City Light. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this issue. Seattle City Light is supportive of the Phase 2 or Part 2 Governance Review Committee proposal as we continue to derive both operational and financial benefits from our participation in EIM. We're also interested in the CAISO, the Board of Governors, and the EIM governing body's commitment to continual improvements in market design that can only be achieved through close coordination and a shared vision. This proposal is a step in the right direction in achieving the vision. This vision, and hopefully will act as a catalyst in further design enhancements in the EIM, while also serving as a first step in a potential expansion of CAISO's market and market offerings to others like the EIM entities. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment, and we again support this proposal and hope to see it unanimously approved.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate your comments. Can we move to the next commenter, please?
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted. Caller, please go ahead. Your line has been unmuted. Please make sure to unmute it on your end.
Thank you. Good morning, CAISO governors and EIM governing body members. I'm Danielle Osborne Mills on behalf of American Clean Power and the American Clean Power Association of California to reiterate what we submitted in our joint letter and to voice our strong support for the Phase 2 recommendations of the Governance Review Committee presented to the CAISO Board of Governors and the Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body for approval today. American Clean Power is the voice of the clean power industry that's powering America's future, providing low-cost solutions to the climate crisis while creating jobs, spurring massive investment in the U.S. economy, and driving high-tech innovation across the nation. American Clean Power California is a state project of the National Association. The Part 2 draft final proposal contains the key element of the GRC's recommendations, and that is the move to a joint authority model for exercise of authority by the board and the governing body on important EIM issues. This move to joint authority is a logical step that will increase the input of California's neighbors on market decisions that directly affect their interests. We've seen the success of the EIM and the working relationships that have been formed by participation in it, and we believe it is critical to continue to build on these relationships as we move forward in addressing Western reliability needs and transitioning to clean energy. California needs enhanced regional coordination in order to meet midterm reliability needs and to work toward the transition to clean power as necessitated under SB 100. The joint authority proposal is a necessary step to show California's neighbors that we are serious about future regional partnerships. We appreciate all of the steps that you've taken to enhance regional collaboration, which is reflected by the tremendous growth of the EIM, and we therefore urge the board and the governing body to adopt the joint authority proposal before you today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Danielle, for those comments from American Clean Power. May we move to the next commenter, please, operator?
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted. Caller, can you please unmute the line from your end and proceed with your comment? Your line has been unmuted. Roger, do you want me to go to the next caller?
Yes, please go to the next caller. We can circle back at the end and see if that caller is still available.
Okay, sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Good morning. My name is Suzanne Cooper. I was a GRC member and from the Bonneville Power Administration. I'd just like to say a few things, probably with a mix of Bonneville perspective and also as a GRC member, and also want to thank the other members of the GRC for all of their active engagement and just the challenging of each other to develop this recommendation in a transparent and very collaborative way with stakeholders. Bonneville was an eager participant in the governance review process because at the same time the committee was conducting its review. Bonneville has been moving through a diligent and complex evaluation of its own potential participation in the EIM and is now in our final decision steps on this. The recommendations of the GRC's Part 2 final proposal are important and meaningful steps forward toward an improved governance of the EIM, which was a key element of interest for BPA and our customers and our stakeholders. In addition, Bonneville believes the recommendations put forward here establish a stronger foundation for dialogue between market stakeholders, the EIM governing body, and the CAISO Board of Governors. This regular dialogue should promote consensus building, which is very important across the EIM market, and serve to strengthen the quality of the decisions that are ultimately made. We view all of the Phase 2 recommendations, and most specifically the recommendation for joint authority between the ISO board and the EIM governing body, to be very positive for enhancing collaboration and decision-making between these bodies, and believe it is the best step forward at this time to advance independent governance within the constraints of current California law. The expansion of the EIM has proved to be advantageous for the entities and all California market participants. As the industry continues to evolve, it will be essential that the various regions of the West continue to participate in a common real-time market that spreads the efficiency and reliability benefits of resource and load diversity across all participants. It is also essential that stewardship of the EIM be on behalf of the interests of all participants and the communities they serve. Bonneville supports the Phase 2 recommendations and appreciates the opportunity to have participated in the full GRC process, both through the established stakeholder venues and as having membership on the GRC. Bonneville notes the significant contributions and guidance by the GRC chair, Therese Hampton, who worked tirelessly to bring this and the prior recommendations before the EIM governing body and the ISO board for consideration. I would also like to personally express appreciation to Chair Galectova and governing body members Fong and Gardner for their active engagement in the GRC as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. We very much appreciate your comments and your service on the GRC. Can we move to the next caller, please, operator?
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Good morning. This is Jan Smutty-Jones from the Independent Energy Producers. Our trade association represents a broad range of generating resources in California and throughout the West. We are supporting the proposal as it's being proposed to the California ISO board as well as the EIM board, and we request your approval. Sometimes things take a long time. I did have the honor of serving as chair of the ISO board about 23 years ago, and we were working with some of our local neighboring states to try to enhance some of the benefits of the ISO platform at that time. A lot has transpired in those years, although it only seems like yesterday. And I think most specifically the success of the voluntary participation of balancing authorities throughout the West in the EIM. And I think that has been very successful in increasing the reliability and affordability of power meeting the needs of throughout the West. I think this proposal, governance is obviously foundational to a well-functioning decision-making process, and this proposal is inclusive, is based on cooperation, recognizes the specific authority of the Cal ISO as well as the specific authority of the EIM board, and provides for exigent circumstances. So I applaud the work of the committee in coming through the shoals of some very difficult issues with a proposal that makes a lot of sense. And I think most importantly, my members, like I believe some of the other speakers, are firmly committed to reaching the carbon neutrality goals that are contained within California law, and I think are expressed throughout a number of our neighboring western states. And in order for that to happen, I think we do need a well-functioning, reliable grid that's affordable and can basically exchange the benefit of all the beautiful resources we have throughout the West in a way that brings affordable, clean power to all of our citizens. So we would encourage your support of this proposal. And again, hats off for good work for the committee and the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you very much for your comments. Operator, may we move to the next caller, please?
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Anthony Bernhardt. I'm a PhD physicist retired on 2005 from 30 years at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and 4 years at a high-tech startup. I'm here representing 2,500 fellow members and business supporters of environmental entrepreneurs in California. Our goal is to promote policies that make strong environmental and economic sense. E2 is thus a strong supporter of the GRC's Joint Authority proposal. Today's decision could significantly reduce CO2 emissions from electricity generation and save member utilities and their customers a great deal of money. To date, the energy imbalance market has saved a remarkable $1.8 billion for utility participants. In the future, we hope to see much larger savings associated with longer lead time markets governed by the joint authority being considered here. Joint authority is also essential in making geographically diverse wind and solar generation available to all member utilities to avoid system inefficiencies and to assure high system reliability. Thank you very much for your attention.
Anthony, thank you very much for your comments. May we move to the next caller, please?
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me, please?
We can.
Thank you. This is Vijay Satyal on behalf of Western Resource Advocates. In the interest of time and recognizing that our comment has already been displayed by Therese Hampton, I will just speak to the other few specifics that we did not submit in writing. On behalf of Western Grid Group, Northwest Energy Coalition, and also the larger clean energy communities called the Public Interest Organizations, WRA wishes to commend and thank you all for supporting this proposal for simply 3 reasons. The 3 big reasons are shows a reflection of coordination between the CalISO community and the EIM entities to work on issues together. It also shows a coordination agreement on power, a power authority that you all have vested in your roles to be able to diffuse contentious issues and try to develop amicable solutions. And more importantly, you all are very familiar with perception becomes reality. Approving this today will demonstrate to the larger West that you can have regional solutions to tackle regional reliability issues and promote a larger decarbonized grid in the West. So thank you for that, and I appreciate you taking these comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. Operator, may we move to the next comment, please?
Sure. So all the new comments in the queue are done, but there was one caller who couldn't make the comment. Do you want to circle back to that caller?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Unfortunately, we still can't.
Caller, your line is... Yes. Yes, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and make your comment. Okay, looks like there is some issue with their audio connection.
Yes. Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Feel free to write in if you need to, but thank you for your efforts at least to make a comment. And sorry for technical difficulties. At this moment, let's turn it over to Anita Decker, the chair of the EIM governing body, for an opportunity for the EIM governing body to have comments and questions.
Thank you, Roger. So I'm going to reserve my comments until after the fellow governing body members make comments. So I believe that Jennifer had a comment. So Jennifer, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chair Decker. First of all, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, everyone. First of all, my apologies to our stakeholders and to everyone else joining us today that I wasn't able to join the webinar and be here on video. We're having some internet outages in my area here in Park City due to the fires and the recent storms, so I am only able to join by phone. But regardless, I'm very happy to be here with all of you this morning. I'd like to start off by just showing my appreciation to Therese Hampton, the chair of the Governance Review Committee, as well as the vice chair, Rebecca Wagner, for all of their hard work in shepherding this effort. I know it took a little longer than I think everybody thought, but as Therese noted in her opening remarks, I think that extra time was well worth it, and I think the proposal that we see in front of us today is true evidence of a job well done. So I want to thank you for all of your hard work, and of course all of the members of the GRC for all of the time that they put in to this important effort. Keep in mind that they all had full-time jobs, and this was truly a volunteer effort at the end of the day, and they all stayed truly committed to the process throughout the 2 years or so. I forgot how much time it's been, but it's been a while. So kudos to everybody, and thanks for a job well done. Now, with those comments out of the way, I think that my question is probably best directed towards Therese. So, Therese, I think this will be a pretty straightforward question for you. You know, just in preparing for today's meeting, I was reviewing the latest version of the proposal and, of course, reviewing stakeholder comments. And I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on a particular issue related to the durability of the delegation of authority. I know this issue has changed a little bit from prior iterations of the GRC's proposal. So I want to make sure I fully understand what those recent changes were. I know that there were also some stakeholder comments received on this issue, and so just want to make sure we're all clear here. So if I understand the latest proposal correctly, there's really two important elements here for enhancing the durability of the delegation of authority. So sort of on one hand, if the Board of Governors were to take a unanimous vote, then they could make certain changes to the delegation of authority to the governing body. Now, in those circumstances, we of course have these notice periods, the 45-day notice period that would begin, and that notice period, of course, would be for the board and the governing body to work out any differences before the board votes. And then there would be a notice period for implementing any changes, and that notice period would be equal in length to the notice period that EIM entities have for withdrawing from the EIM, which is currently set at 180 days. So I think that part of it makes sense to me, and it sounds like under those circumstances, the Board of Governors would be able to make fairly significant changes to the delegation of authority, including rescinding the delegation of authority entirely. So I think that's the first question that I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. And then when we look at the exceptions to those notice period, when you talked about the EIM entities representing 75% or more of the net energy for load, if they were to suddenly give notice to withdraw from the EIM, then in those circumstances, we would be able to revert the delegation of authority back to its original scope. So this would not be a full rescinding of that delegation of authority, but rather back to the original delegation, which would include primary as well as advisory authority. So I realize that was a long question, Therese, and so if you need me to restate any of that, please let me know. But I'm just trying to make sure I understand how the durability is affected where we have EIM entities representing 75% or more who are leaving versus a situation where we don't have a sort of a majority of entities leaving and we go through these two notice periods. So if you could just add a little bit of clarity for me around that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gardner. Actually, I think you did a really nice summary of the proposal. So there is a latitude for the ISO board to make any changes to governance, completely withdraw the delegation of authority, make other modifications with those notice periods, with a unanimous vote, and if there's a 45-day between the governing body advisory opinion and the ISO board decision, and with a 180-day notice. Kind of no real limitation or constraint on what can be considered or evaluated in that process. If there was a change desired without having the notice periods, because you had significant withdrawal of EIM entities, then the limitation is just to revert to the previous delegation of authority. That wouldn't, and I think that, and I think we talked about there's optionality, right? If you lost a lot of EIM entities and you want to revert to previous authority and contemplate something different, you can do that, but then that would be subject to the longer process with the notice periods for those that are remaining, for those EIM entities that might be remaining.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification. I appreciate it, Therese. And Chair Decker, there are no other questions for me at this time.
All right, and I believe Val has a comment or question.
Thank you, Chair Decker. So I know I'm in good company when I extend my thank you to each and every member of the GRC, including CAISO members, and I'll give a particular shout out to Bert Gross, excuse me, Dan Schonkweiler, and former CAISO member Peter Calusi, to Board Chair Galitova, and to my colleague, Jennifer Gardner, who was an active GRC member through June 30th, and you just saw her in action. She was a very active member. Now, know full well, and it can't be said often enough, that without the amazing Therese Hampton, we probably would have floundered a bit and flailed a bit, and we would not have the solid proposal on EIM governance that we have today. To all of the stakeholders, and many of you are on the call today, who took the time to consider EIM governance over the past couple of years, the GRC took your comments seriously and debated whether and how your suggestions and concerns could be included in the proposal. From start to toward the end, it really felt like a long row to hoe, but here we are. We have a solid and workable governance model that was, I would say, truly a group effort. Thank you to everyone. I will be voting in full support of the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Val. And John, I believe you had a comment as well, or a question?
Thanks, Chair Decker. Yeah, this is John Prescott. Just a couple of comments real quickly. I just want to pile on my thanks to the GRC members, the ISO staff, certainly, and all the stakeholders that participated in this effort to get to this end state. And like you just heard from Member Fong, I plan to vote to approve this as well. And if approved, I'll do my best to apply this expansion of our governance responsibilities to benefit the market as a whole and to assure that we have continued transparency, fairness, and benefits that the Western EIM brings to the regional participants and ultimately to electricity end users, the consumers. Also, I believe this change greatly enhances and demonstrates the trust between market participants and increases the chances for a long-awaited and much-anticipated extended day-ahead regional electricity market, which I believe will create value and enhance environmental benefits to the region. And finally, I'd like to thank the Board of Governors for their support of this initiative and their vision of a broader regional electricity market. Thank you.
All right. With that, Rob, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Before I make my kind of prepared remarks, I wanted to thank Therese for her comments during her presentation about the need of some of the detail that ultimately went into the final proposal on joint authority and working through that set of comments that came after the phase one process. I think the importance there is that right now, it's not necessarily needed, and that this is something that we will rely on down the road, and there likely will be new people involved. And at that point, they're going to rely on what is in the proposal and what gets documented. And it's going to be that which gets used. And so if in the event this ever comes up,
it needs to be spelled out clearly so that those who are not involved now can properly implement it. And I thought she made a great point on that. But I would like to frame comments into three areas: the work by the GRC, input by the stakeholders, and why we need to take the recommended action on the proposal. And I note that as I listen to everybody, I don't have very many original remarks here, except one, and that's towards the end. But I do think it's worth repeating this because the effort that's gone into it. So with respect to the work by the GRC, like everybody else, I'd like to express my appreciation for the GRC for their tireless efforts over the last 2 years. A special thank you and appreciation to Therese Hampton for chairing the GRC from start to finish. And for me, another special thank you goes to Val for representing the governing body, getting our input, and keeping us informed. And certainly a special thank you to each of the other members of the GRC for doing the same thing for the people, groups, and interests that they represented. The proposal reflects great collaboration, stakeholder interaction, and input. It's obvious that the GRC developed a delicate balance to the range of perspectives in the proposal before us. The GRC was responsive to input by stakeholders and their comments. The record reflects that the GRC was meticulous in addressing the input. The GRC did this carefully, judiciously, and effectively. I do think that the unanimous support of the proposal by the GRC members and the very strong support by stakeholders across a spectrum of interests indicates that the GRC met the needs and objectives in developing and providing this proposal to us. I do think it goes, and it's important to recognize the input by the stakeholders and the comments that they made. That we need to thank them for their engagement, the advice, the recommendations, and the comments to the GRC. The stakeholder provided meaningful thoughts and perspectives in response to GRC straw proposals, draft documents, and inquiries. This input by the stakeholders was significant in terms of the breadth and depth of their comments. The comments were rational, but many times diametrically opposed from other comments. The stakeholders lobbied effectively to help shape the ultimate outcome, and it forced the GRC to carefully weigh and balance all of the perspectives. The stakeholder engagement and input reflects the perceived and actual importance of this issue. And then I'd like to end with why we need to take the recommended action on the proposal. In my opinion, the proposed changes will move the governance of the Board of Governors and the governing body in the right direction. It requires greater coordination between the Board of Governors and governing body members, with each body having a greater understanding of the other. Maybe more importantly, it relies on increased trust between the two different decisional bodies and the stakeholders. The increased trust will be needed to be effective. The proposal has made many interesting and positive evolutions from the original straw proposal, which I believe is a strong reflection of the many and varied input of stakeholders. The changes, if accepted, are building the right foundation for the expanded EIM and for a more coordinated, regionalized West. I don't believe we could expect to see the current EIM continue to grow and evolve without these changes. With the proposed changes, the West will be better prepared to meet the ongoing and future challenges of changing resources and improved resiliency. It will also lead towards an improved realization of the Western interconnection. And very importantly, the West will likely evolve differently if we don't act on this proposal. The proposal will help in meeting the collective and individual needs. The proposed changes are needed for the West to be successful, and the time is right for these changes. And as stated by the other governing body members, I am proud to support this proposal and will vote yes to approve. Chair Decker, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Rob. So with that, I have a couple comments to make, and I would say that my colleagues have very well stated already my thoughts and sentiments about how important this actual proposal is. I too want to really thank Therese Hampton for her guidance on this committee. And from a couple perspectives, she brought credibility, trust, significant listening skills, problem-solving skills, bringing people together to continue to iterate until I think they brought something forward that we can all work within, that we can move forward on, and I think that absolutely strengthens the balance of decision-making between the Board of Governors and the governing body. So I'm very excited to work in this forum as a joint authority. I also really do want to say a thank you to stakeholders. And, we say stakeholders and we think about the governing body members who did spend months and hours and days working on the proposals and reshaping them by listening to stakeholders, not through stakeholder comments, but through stakeholder individual outreach. And while there were not a lot of in-person meetings, I know as people did encounter people here and there or on phone calls, certainly things around both the first proposal and the second proposal were all often a part of the conversation, and they constructively brought those comments back and put them in the mix and continued to work very hard and diligently on getting to where we are today. I think the proposal we have before us is an elegant proposal. I think it will be durable. So I also want to commend the GRC committee itself and their work with stakeholders and stakeholders who stepped forward on their own and did their own outreach, and sometimes to some of us. I also want to thank the Cal ISO staff. This probably took them away from other things that were very critical within the ISO, not that this is not critical, it certainly is in terms of the interest of our stakeholders, but they still had to carve out time to dedicate to the thinking and the question answering along the lines of the proposals. I do want to thank Peter Colosi, and he didn't make it to the finish line, but he got darn close. And I know he was instrumental along the way to where we are today. I too will be supporting this proposal. From my perspective, it is a very strong signal and a very strong step to getting to a Western-wide market, which I think to the benefit of not only the environment, the renewables development, the transmission needs, and to the customers. The consumers are going to have to pay these bills. If we can't leverage our systems to the best interests of our consumers, we need to think we need to rethink what we're doing. And I think this is definitely a step in that direction on behalf of consumers as well. So with that, if there are no other questions from the governing body, I'm going to turn it back to Roger.
Thank you, Chair Decker. At this point, let me turn it to Chair Galitova of the ISO Board of Governors for an opportunity for the Board of Governors to express questions and comments.
Thank you, Roger, very much. This has been an exciting morning, and yes, I see my screen, and I will go one by one with the board members for comments and questions. As my screen is up, Ash, Jen, Mary, and Severin. So, Ash, you have the floor.
Just very briefly, because I don't want to take up time, because I agree pretty much with everyone else has said. Thank you to the GRC for doing great work, and thank you, Angelina, for your time on the committee. I think that this is a first step. It's a really important step. I'm supportive of it. We have lots of work to do moving forward, but I thank everyone for their work and for a very good proposal.
Thank you so much. Jen?
Yes, I'd like to just add my thanks to everyone that has worked so hard for so long to pull this together. I know it has been a very difficult path with a lot of challenging issues to resolve, and it's really pretty remarkable that we've gotten to this point. I've had a hard time getting my head around this unanimous voting requirement and getting an understanding of what that issue means, but I'm comfortable with what's been proposed and what is being recommended. Because first, I think we have a very good track record, but that both boards have basically been able to reach unanimous agreement on all issues. And we are going to continue to prove that we can work together to get to good solutions that benefit everyone responsible. We did have some disagreements. I'm still comfortable that there will be at least 3 reasonable minds on the EIM board and 3 reasonable minds on the ISO board that will be able to come to a good solution for us, and that again, we've been able to work collaboratively together, and I don't think there's any reason to believe that we won't be able to do that. And in particular, I just want to say, I do think the proposal before us today, I want to thank all the members of the GRC that worked so hard to move away from the dual filing concept, because I know that was challenging, and there's some interest in saying let's go to FERC and let them decide. But I think in terms of the long-term path that we have in the West, our goal should be to try and work out our issues here together in the West and come to solutions that will benefit everybody and think through the issues here. So I think this model with the simple majority being able to basically move things forward as we see fit, with our track record of being able to do things unanimously, and the fact that you've put together a framework that I think we can build on for the future, I'm very supportive of this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan. Mary?
Yeah, I just want to echo what my colleagues have said about our gratitude to the GRC committee, and particularly to you, Angelina, who worked the hardest on this and the longest. I share Anita's enthusiasm for the ultimate goal being the benefit of the ratepayer in our Western states. I think that's why we're doing it. And I think that particularly given the challenges we faced the last couple of years, the purpose or the goal of being more interdependent is a good one, because we stand to get to these goals as a group a lot faster than as individuals. So, and I also share Jan's comment that I think both of these boards have excellent members that are reasonable and will work through things that are challenging, whether they agree or disagree, and that we will always have a core group that will agree. So this process, and I admire how you've done this, Therese and Val, particularly having just reread the stakeholder comments. You know, not everybody didn't get everything, okay? But enough people got what they needed. So congratulations on that, because that's not easy to do. So, and I want to thank the ISO staff, because I know Elliot is our chief enthusiast, and the staff has worked. I mean, when I first arrived at the ISO with Severin, this was one of the first things we agreed to. I think this was one of the first things we did was support for this process. So it kind of feels good to fast forward 3 years and see it at this point. So anyway, congratulations, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you so much, Mary Leslie. Severin?
Yes, thank you. I will just add my thanks to the GRC and to the CAISO staff. I think this is the right place to end up. I do want to just say that I was just extremely impressed with the final report, and as I read through it and thought about, which is part of our job, every possible outcome and minutia, and referred to the actual report and dug in, there was the answer. So I think the committee has just done an extremely thorough and thoughtful job, and has gotten everyone, it sounds like, to the point where they are comfortable with this, including me, and I intend to vote for it, and look forward to expanding further. You know, integration of these electricity markets is going to be absolutely critical to getting to a low carbon future grid. We can't do it individually. We have to do it as a whole, and I think this is an important step in that direction.
Thank you so much, fellow board members, Severin Borenstein, Mary Leslie, Jan Shori, Ash Bagward, and of course all the GRC members, and especially Val Fong, who was the other known voting member on the committee that we worked closely with together. Of course, Therese Hampton as the chair, we can never say enough about the awesomeness of your leadership. Everyone deserves our appreciation and gratitude for their dedication and hard work. The GRC did a terrific job, and the extensive and involved process has resulted in a serious proposal that will lead to an improved CAISO, EIM, and stakeholder collaboration. I also agree that the two-part process has improved the final product and has made it a more robust proposal and a much more nuanced one as well. The opportunities for joint meetings and more engagements towards decisions should serve all of us well. This is an evolution and an advancement for governance and will enable us to work together to navigate challenges in a more constructive and collaborative manner. So I too look forward to increased interactions with the EIM governing body and other Western partners as we all work together to meet our individual state policy objectives and operate a more reliable, resilient, and decarbonized grid throughout the West. So thank you very much to everyone for your hard work, and I look forward to the vote. Roger, back to you.
Thank you, Chair Galitva. At this point, we have on our schedule an opportunity for the GRC members to comment if they would like. We have already heard from Eric Eisenman, Suzanne Cooper, and Jennifer Gardner, but if any of the other GRC members would like to make a comment, please go ahead and queue up that comment. I will also note, since we did have a caller previously that wasn't able to speak, I don't know if they're still in the queue, but I have also heard that we have another caller in the queue. So why don't we, as we're getting GRC comments, if we pick up those comments as well, we're welcome to do so. So operator, if you could open the line for comments again at this point from GRC members, or if anyone else has any final public comment.
And Roger, this is Jennifer. Just a quick clarification. My comments were made in my capacity as a governing body member as opposed to a former GRC member, just so we can keep the record clear. I don't want to cause any confusion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you're welcome to make additional comments if you would like to do so in your former capacity.
Thank you.
As a reminder, if you're using the WebEx audio, you may enter the queue by using the WebEx raise hand icon located just above the chat panel. You'll hear a beep tone when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your name, affiliation, and comment. If you're just on the phone line and not using the WebEx audio, please dial #2 on your phone. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your name, affiliation, and comment. So moving on to the caller. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Good morning. This is Mary Winky. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Okay, great. I think I was the one that was attempting to make a comment earlier and for some reason was unable to do so. My name is Mary Winky. I was a member of the GRC, and I also am representing PacifiCorp today. I just wanted to echo a lot of what has already been said regarding the GRC process and the ability of that group to really work together toward a common goal despite having a diversity of interests. I really think the group, with Teresa's leadership, came together and worked well even through disagreements and different perspectives, and it was really an honor to participate in that process and really see how that came together. This decision today represents a step change improvement in governance for the EIM, and I strongly believe that this will build upon the existing structure to further improve the decision-making process and build relationships and collaboration among the Board of Governors and the EIM governing body. Speaking for PacifiCorp, the central issue for us was the scope of the delegation of authority. And echoing what Eric said earlier, there was really a process to thread a needle to figure out what was that right scope of authority. At the end of the day, I think we landed in a good spot. As Therese mentioned, the scope is very clear, and I think there's a lot of benefit to having that clarity, and it gives us an opportunity to really exercise and see what the joint authority model looks like while we still have that clear scope. That said, we view this as an evolution in governance. I think there is room to continue this conversation as markets evolve and as the EIM continues to evolve. Thank you for letting me make a comment today, and as with everyone else that has spoken, I also would support approval of this proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Do we have any other commenters on the line, operator?
Looks like there are a few commentators, but they have already made their comment in the previous comment section, looks like, but I see the same names in the queue. So do you want me to unmute their line one by one and check if they have to make a new comment right now?
Yes, let's make sure I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak. So to avoid any confusion on that, let's go ahead and quickly do that, please.
Okay, sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted. Yes, please go ahead and make your comment. Your line has been unmuted.
Okay, that sounds like maybe that is an inadvertent. Let's go to the next caller, please.
Sure. Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted. Okay, looks like they do not have a comment right now.
Okay.
Can I go to the next caller?
Please.
Caller, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted. Okay, I do not hear anything, and that was the last caller in the queue as of now.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your patience. I did want to make sure that we gave everyone full opportunity to comment today as they deem necessary. At this point, we have on our schedule the opportunity for the board and the governing body to do some final deliberations before we go to a vote. We have had a lot of discussion today, and I think great discussion, so it's not required, but let me give you that. And for that, I will first turn it to Chair Decker and of the EIM governing body, and to canvass your members to see if there are any final comments or deliberations before we vote.
Thank you, Roger. So I'm just going to go right down the line. I'm going to actually start with Val since she was our chair, our assignee on the GRC, and I'm just going to go right through the board. Any further comments? So Val, any further comments or questions?
No, but thank you.
John, any further comments or questions?
No, nothing to add, thanks.
Rob, any further comments or questions?
Nothing to add.
And Jennifer, any further comments or questions? Sometimes it takes a minute to get off mute.
Yes, Jennifer, please go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
My apology, I was double muted there. No further comments or questions for me, Chair Decker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Roger, the governing body has no further comments or questions. I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you. And Chair Galitova, your opportunity for the Board of Governors if there are any more comments, questions, or deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roger. Does anybody on the Board of Governors have any comments or questions at this time? I think we have all said pretty much everything we wanted to say. So thank you, Roger, and thank you, board members.
Thank you. Now is our opportunity for our motion, which if we can display the motion, we will first do a motion of the Western EIM governing body. Move that the EIM governing body approves the proposed changes recommended in the EIM Governance Review Committee's Part 2 draft final proposal dated July 19, 2021. Can I have a moving party, please?
This is Val. I move.
Thank you, Val. And second?
This is Rob. I'll second that.
John was quicker, but thank you, Rob. And let me go ahead with the vote. Chair Decker, your vote, please.
Aye.
Member Fong, your vote, please.
Aye.
Member Gardner?
An enthusiastic aye.
Vice Chair Konzioka?
Aye.
And Member Prescott?
Aye.
Thank you, governing body. Your vote has been recorded at 5-0. Let me now move to the Board of Governors. Move that the ISO Board of Governors approves the proposed changes recommended in the EIM Governance Review Committee's Part 2 draft final proposal dated July 19, 2021. Going in alphabetical order, Vice Chair Bhagwat, your vote. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. May I have a moving party, please? I got so excited.
I'm off of mute, so I'll move.
Thank you, Ash. I appreciate that. In a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Severin. Now, Vice Chair Bhagwat, your vote.
Aye.
Governor Bornstein.
Aye.
Chair Galetova.
I'm going to echo Jennifer Gardner, enthusiastic aye.
Ah, okay. And Governor Leslie?
Aye.
And Governor Shorey?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you, governing board member, thank you, board members. And I will enthusiastically state that we have a 5-0 vote and the motion has passed. At this up, I'd like to give our CEO, Elliot Mainzer, an opportunity to comment.
Well, thank you, Roger. And I am privileged to be the first to formally congratulate the GRC on this absolutely outstanding outcome. And I'd just also like to recognize the just tremendous leadership of Therese Hampton and the contributions of the dedicated members of the GRC, as well as just the tremendous support of stakeholders across the West. I just deeply appreciate that. And on behalf of all of us at the ISO, I just wanted to say that we will continue to work every day to build on this important moment and to help strengthen trust, collaboration, and coordination with our many partners across the West. To both the governing body and our Board of Governors today, thank you very much for your affirmative votes, and we're really looking forward to next steps. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elliot. And finally, I would like to turn it over to Chair Decker from the EIM governing body, and I believe you have a few words you'd like to state.
I do, and I know this is towards the end of the meeting. The most exciting thing, which was the vote, has occurred. But I'm hoping the participants will hang on just a few more minutes because we have all spent a lot of time really applauding the work of the GRC, and I have a resolution to before me to read to for the governance review committee members, and I think it's really important that they actually see that there's actual formal recognition for the work that they did, which is little pay for all the time they spent. But nonetheless, this is a resolution of appreciation for the EIM Governance Review Committee. Whereas the Board of Governors and the EIM governing body established EIM Governance Review Committee in 2019 to develop and propose refinements to the governance of the energy imbalance market, and whereas the committee members were mindful in their work of the various stakeholder interests throughout the West and have worked tirelessly to advance EIM governance, and whereas committee members graciously volunteered their time and expertise and conducted extensive outreach to stakeholders, and whereas committee members demonstrated their commitment by conducting numerous meetings to consider, present, and develop ideas for improvements to the EIM governance over a period of 20 months. You could have like 3 kids during that time. Whereas the committee, through an iterative stakeholder process, identified 6 broad categories of issues and developed 2 extensive written proposals to address those topics for consideration by the EIM governing body and the Board of Governors. And whereas the committee members at all times performed their work in a collaborative manner with great integrity and insight, thus providing outstanding service to the ISO and all of the stakeholders. Be it resolved that the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body and the Board of Governors hereby extend their utmost gratitude and sincere appreciation to the EIM Governance Review Committee members for their thoughtful and valuable service and dedication to the California ISO, the Western Energy Balance Market, and all the stakeholders. And this has been signed by the governing body members and the Board of Governors. Thank you. I know, where's the champagne?
Thank you so much, Chair Decker. I just wanted to make a quick comment that we didn't have 3 babies at the GRC while the GRC process was taking place, but we did have 2. So yes, it was a virtual process. It took a little bit longer, but I think we have a better product to show for it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Decker and Chair Galitova. Very nicely done on the resolution. And if we were in person, we would all stand up and give a round of applause, but we can virtually do so. And I congratulate the GRC on absolutely excellent work, and just personally, my team, Bert and Dan, and everyone from the ISO, Stacy Crowley and Peter Calusi, really, really fabulous work and really a great effort and great collaboration. So I wanted to express that as well. At this point, I think we can adjourn our meeting for today.